In the midst of tragedy, are we able to even acknowledge the Lord and his hand in our lives? Are we able to acknowledge his presence and his purity and his power in the ways that Joseph did? When we are in the midst of despair, can we still recognize ourselves as his? I want to talk about 3 very specific ways that Joseph's prayer was full of faith. And it's these 3 ways that we can take and very specifically apply to our own prayers in order to bring more light into our lives when we feel surrounded by darkness. The first principle of faith that we find in Joseph's prayer is the fact that Joseph acknowledges God. He literally says, "Oh God, where art thou?" He reaches out to God. He still believes in God. And though we have not received manifestations of God in the same way that Joseph has, we have received manifestations from God. I think sometimes when we find ourselves in the dark, it's hard to remember the light. It's hard to continue believing that we have received light from God. It's hard to keep trusting in those manifestations that we once held so dear. That's the very first principle, that Joseph was reaching out to God. "Oh God, where art thou?" He's not saying, "Oh God, are you even real? What's going on? This is so difficult." He's saying, "Where are you? I know you're there. Where are you?" Even when the Lord was not providing immediate solutions or softening hearts or providing a way of escape for Joseph and his companions, Joseph reached out to God. Principle number 2 is that despite everything that was going on, Joseph still acknowledged the perfection of God. He says, "Thy pure eye," and he says, "Maker of heaven and earth and seas and all things that in them are." He is acknowledging this goodness of God. He's saying, "God, you're there. I believe that you're there." And number 2 is that he's saying, "I acknowledge that you are good and powerful." Despite these less than perfect circumstances, Joseph took these seemingly juxtaposed concepts of God's goodness, but also his willingness to allow this despair. He took these 2 concepts, and what Joseph got out of that was that God was good. He continued to acknowledge God's goodness, and that is an immense step of faith. Number 3, principle of faith in Joseph's prayer, is that Joseph continually acknowledged the sacred relationship between the saints and the Lord. I think sometimes it's very easy to be tempted to believe that the Lord is angry with you or disappointed, or that he is turning his back on you. I know that if I had been in Joseph's situation, I probably would have assumed something like that. He continually implies the idea that he and the saints belong to Christ. And maybe there were times when he struggled with that, but in this prayer, it did not waver. Thy saints. Principle number 3, he acknowledged the sacred relationship between he and his Savior and the saints and their Savior. Joseph Smith's prayer was filled with faith. And it's interesting how we can look at these 3 principles of faith and view them as stepping stones towards building faith powerful enough to move mountains. If we can take these 3 principles and apply them to our own prayers, we find salvation in all the aspects that are available to us in this life. When we can acknowledge and have faith in these 3 principles, believe that God is there, that he is good and powerful, and that he loves us.